administration dedicated to the idea of a truly integrated nation. And it's making us tough. It might be slow, it may take a generation to develop, but the important thing is, it is making us tough.
In 1985, just 1 year after George Orwell's 1984 became public domain, Kee Tuan Chai staged a bold reinterpretation of it. It was called 1984, Here and Now. And it wasn't just Orwellian fiction. It was a mirror. One pointed directly at Malaysia's uneasy state of multiculturalism. On stage, the characters spoke across racial and class lines, interrogating power and creating an illusion of harmony. Off stage, the government was tightening laws and censorship. Authorities withheld the production's permit until just 2 weeks before opening night, giving them a subtle warning to back off. But it had the opposite effect. Word spread and curiosity grew. And when the curtains finally rose, it played a full house, every night for 5 nights. This wasn't just a play, it was a line in the sand. A declaration that theatre in Malaysia could provoke, resist, and dare to ask dangerous questions. At the center of it all was Krishen Jit, the director who spent 3 decades using theatre not just to reflect society, but to challenge the taboos that held it together. This is how Krishen Jit challenged Malaysia's multiculturalism. KUPAS is a series where we take a deep dive into the Malaysian performing arts scene as part of the BOH Cameronian Arts Awards legacy. Born in 1939 in capital city of British Malaya, Krishen was brought up in a colonial middle class, shaped by an education system that pushed English language theatre as a form of opportunity to be close to the English culture. Nevertheless, this did not stop Krishen from surrounding himself in the presence of multiculturalism. But the promise of a multicultural nation began to fracture. After gaining independence in 1957, Malaysia experienced a traumatic racial riot that shocked the country into a new era of fear. Change in economic, political, and cultural policy reshaped the frames of Malaysian identity. Krishen saw these cracks and began to question about the divide between the Malays and the non-Malays. For Krishen, theatre became a space to explore the tensions between national identity and cultural plurality.
His growing up was a very big influence in the kind of theatre that he wanted to make. So he would talk about growing up in Batu Road, now Jalan Tunku Abdul Rahman. He would see street performances, he would see wayang, he would sneak into the cinema, he would watch performances in the temple, let's say, or wherever he could. And these were performances that had multiple cultural references. It was influenced by that understanding and that embodied experience of growing up in a Malaysia, urban Malaysia. All kinds of cultures coexisted and cultural influences fed into each other.
He revised his politics of theatre and relocated to Malay language theatre and directing stories about Malay culture. One of Krishen's earliest inspiration in Malay language theatre was playwright Syed Alwi, a bold and uncompromising voice in Malay language drama. In 1975, Krishen directed one of his oldest and boldest plays, Tok Perak by Syed Alwi. Set in post-independence Malaysia, Tok Perak was a medicine seller who travelled across Malaya seeking for a place that he can call home. The play questioned authority, tradition, and how political rhetoric could mask inequality. In her paper, Professor Charlene wrote, Krishen staged issues of acceptance and belongings in ways that recast cultural boundaries and advance flexible ideas about the Malay community as a symbolic of Malaysians at large. By directing Tok Perak, Krishen demonstrated that Malay language theatre could do more than reflect cultural identity. It could provoke reflections across racial lines. At a time when language often reinforced division, he treated it as a bridge, inviting multicultural audiences into a shared, uneasy conversation. In the same play, he casted his characters against races and background. He casted urban and veteran actors such as Dato Farida American, Vijaya Samarawikrama, Rahim Razali, Syed Alwi, and many more representing the marginality in Malay community. His conscious decision to cast non-Malays as urban Malays was his way of redrawing cultural boundaries by mixing what was Malay and non-Malay.
Early 80s, Krishen was asked to lead a festival, a retrospective of Malay language theatre, and he was then accused of not being qualified through Surat Layang. The reason given was that how can this non-Malay be the person who curates and puts together a retrospective festival of Malay language theatre, despite the fact that he had been involved in Malay language theatre, was writing for Dewan Budaya in Malay, was fluent in Malay. And I think what happened with Krishen in the early 80s, 1980 or 81, if I'm not wrong, is it propelled him to question what he was doing. It was painful, it was disappointing, but more importantly, I think he also then questioned whether his commitment to a kind of singularity, which was Malay language theatre, was also problematic.
Rather than retreating from theatre, Krishen pivoted. In 1984, Krishen Jit co-founded the Five Arts Centre alongside Marion De Cruz, Chin San Sui, K.S. Manyam, and Reza Piadasa. Their work tackled big taboo topics such as race, gender, and authoritarianism whilst leading the Malaysian art scene to greater heights, especially for the younger generations.
So, that generation, they were trying to work with wayang kulit in their modern performances. They were trying to be influenced by Chinese opera or street theatre that they saw. How do I bring that into the theatre? How do I work with the English language? A lot of things at work, right? They're trying to decolonize, but they were also brought up in colonialism. So that's one. They were experimenting with all these different aesthetic and social possibilities. Let's say that early manifestation of Five Arts was formed. And it's pretty simple. It's tell other stories, create original Malaysian work. Let's not put on more Western play, So where are our voices, our narratives, our images, our own vocabulary?
A Chance Encounter in 1999 was a provoking work that blurred the lines between scripted and spontaneous in theatre, produced by Five Arts Centre. Dato Farida American plays a mama woman in a beauty shop, and Fu Mei Lin, who plays a Cantonese cosmetic saleswoman. The two get into an interesting encounter, realizing that despite their differences in culture and upbringing, they were also similar. What caught most off guard was the use of the language. They used different physical and verbal communications that reflected the linguistics and cultural identities of their characters, inventing a language of their own.
Satu boyfriend mana cukup. Dua pun tak ada cukup lah. Nanti kita mesti buat mana pula boleh pilih lah.
Krishen was trying to paint a picture of what it could look like to be living within, outside of one's race or culture, and to create mutual respect, trust, and understanding of one another.
So I began to learn about how his background as a trained historian was probably really crucial in the kinds of ways that he wanted to engage. Things were social and cultural and political, but he was not an activist type artist, right? He was someone who really was interested in form and aesthetic, and he was interested in how form and aesthetics could become the language that people used to speak poetically and symbolically through theatre or through other art forms that he wasn't involved in so much.
Even then, he wasn't seeking for validation in his works. He was seeking for honesty. Despite the public viewed him as too Western or the backlash he received for being non-Malay, Krishen pushed forward. What mattered was the dialogue that he sparked, and that dialogue still continues today.
As someone who had the privilege of a certain kind of education that he had, there was a desire to open up spaces for learning. So Krishen was responsible for developing and setting up the theatre studies department in the University of Malaya. And he was also important in helping to develop and build the theatre department in what is now Aswara, but at the time was Academy Seni Kebangsaan, ASK, and forging spaces where people come and learn the art form, theatre particularly.
Before his passing, Krishen directed a play titled 710 in 2003. He directed a 7 to 10 minute short plays written by 7 multi-generational writers of different experiences and practices. Krishen was deeply invested in emerging voices, not just as a mentor, but as a collaborator. He believed that if theatre was going to remain relevant, it had to grow beyond him.
I think his approach to nurturing talent was to work with it, to see it not as a threat, which sometimes more established people can feel this tension. But he, it's like, no, I'll work with whoever who wants to work with me. And he was really absorbent of impulses, ideas, different ways of approaching theatre. I think he would often say, like, there's no real precedent in theatre, especially when it comes to directing. Just because you've got 30 years of experience as a director might not make you a better director than someone who's got like 5 years of experience or 2 years of experience, because every show you go again.
Krishen's impact is everywhere, directly and indirectly, through the performing arts. And he often used the power of theatre to tell the truth. But as a multicultural society, we need to ask ourselves, what are we still trying to hide? Why are we still afraid to face the truth? Thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into Malaysia's performing arts scene.